And like one of the most perverse ones, for example, is mass shooting coverage, right? And it's not just that mass shooting coverage is, they plaster it all over the wall so they can get the clicks and everybody wants their pound of flesh, that kind of thing. I mean, that's obvious, but the deeper, more concerning thing is that there is social science that has shown that mass shooting coverage increases mass shootings. In the same way, like for instance, they did this initially, this kind of science was really boiled out of like San Francisco, and I think the 1970s. I could be wrong about the dates, but everybody's jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, it was just like every other day, there's another person jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And what they did was all of the newspapers all got together and all made a rule that they were never going to publish another story about people jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and people stopped jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
And that led to a data pool that you could analyze, and you could say, okay, well, what ratio of the people jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge is due to media saturation, right? And then the techniques that came out of that have been applied to mass shootings, and you can see that you end up with these copycat mass shootings, and the numbers are pretty egregious. It's something like 40% of mass shootings would go away if the media just never covered another mass shooting. And what that means, though, is that they have a tremendous amount of incentive. They have two incentives to treat mass shootings like they do. The first one is to make all the money off the mass shooting, but the second incentive is to create another one so they could make more money off of it. And there's game theory that comes into it, right? Because you're in a Nash equilibrium of suck here. It's a prisoner's dilemma, because if CNN and NBC and Fox News decided to not cover a mass shooting, then Vox might still cover it, and then Vox gets all the clicks. So unless you had some kind of, what Scott Alexander at Slice Narcotics calls coordination problems, unless you're able to coordinate every single media outlet into the same behavior of not publishing about the mass shooting, then whoever decided to publish about it would end up taking all of the market share for the coverage of the mass shooting, and then you'd still have the problem. So you're stuck in this, layer of suck where it's a blood-soaked orgy of clicks. And that's just one example, right? The mass shooting problem, like that kind of thing happens for every topic and at every layer of modern media. And it all goes back to the pay-per-click business model, right?
Well, it's a good example because in a sense, what you really need is a conspiracy. You need an actual conspiracy in order to cover up mass shootings so that they go down. And there's all sorts of examples of this. Suicide.
Right.
We know that suicide has a contagious and a viral element to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that you talk about, and even the suicide literature, the people who cover suicide and address it know this. And so they tend to, you'll get trigger warnings and things like that on media channels with stories about suicide, because they know that the more they present suicide, the more people will take their lives.
Right.
And so here, I think part of what we're actually heading into is a space where we have to fundamentally reconsider the valence of the term conspiracy theory. Because if, as you suggest, and I think you're right, mass shootings build on each other, and we're sort of in a media market where, let's say you actually manage to concoct a conspiracy. You get all the major media players around a table, and they all agree that there'll be no national stories about mass shootings. You've still got Twitter, you've still got YouTube, you've still got all of these. And so that vacuum then creates a space where some unknown person like you who wrote a Medium post, or me who made a YouTube video about Jordan Peterson, boom, now suddenly a new career launches. And for most people, that new career is potentially more lucrative than whatever day job they were working before. Not only lucrative in terms of the finance, but lucrative in terms of the hits, the dopamine, all of those dynamics. And so you almost need a conspiracy theory plus censorship to achieve a reduction in some of these things. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, okay, so yes, you would need all that, but there have been times all throughout, the history of mankind where we ran into coordination problems before, right? Where being selfish was a maximal outcome unless everyone all got together and all chose not to be selfish, right? Okay. And knowing your space, I think you'll know how those problems were usually solved in mankind up until maybe 200 or 300 years ago. They were solved with religion, right? Okay. So then you can look at, well, religion is it a conspiracy theory? I don't know if we want to make that parallel or not, but what it is it is a one of its functions is as a social control mechanism to keep the beehive working together,